Okay, so we've got a good group here. I know a few others might jump in a moment. I see a lot of familiar names. So again, I just want to say thank you for joining today's webinar. It's all about net metering and how it's changing in North Carolina. This is being put on, of course, by us here at Cape Fear Energy Systems. Many of you have already probably worked with us on projects on your own homes, and you're curious to learn about what the changes mean for you. So I'm certainly excited to share that today. But also many of you might not have yet worked with us on a project. And so just want to welcome you in as well to learn about what it could look like and what the impacts are on a potential project you could be considering. Um, and yeah, we'll go ahead and we'll jump right into it. This is going to be moving pretty quick. We've got a lot of content to go through. We want to encourage you, if you have any questions, go ahead and submit them into the Q&A, and we'll try to address as many as we can at the end of our time. Thank you. All right, so on the agenda, we're going to start by covering what is net metering for anyone who does not already have solar and maybe isn't familiar with how it works with Duke Energy. We'll cover that. Then we'll talk about time of use and understanding what the changes, the impact of those changes might have, what it would look like for someone to go solar next year. We'll talk about specifically what those changes are that are occurring, the key dates to have in mind, so that you can then understand, what the impact would be to you as an existing solar homeowner, whether you're a legacy customer or someone who's already on net metering bridge. We'll talk through that. And then, of course, impact on new customers. If you're on net metering bridge, we'll talk about the timeline you have, as well as, what residential solar choice means and getting transitioned to that in the future. Or if you've yet to make a decision on a project, what ultimately you're weighing if you decide to hold off. And we'll talk about, the legacy advantage, really just referring to not just legacy customers, but those of you who do go ahead and jump in and take the leap and jump into net metering bridge and locking your spot in. And then, of course, as I mentioned, again, we'll touch on some Q&A at the end of our time. All right, so starting here, what is net metering? And so for any of you who already have a solar system on your home, you know that net metering describes the interconnection model that's with Duke Energy, your utility, outlines how you pay for the energy that you consume and how you're credited for the solar energy that you produce and do push back to the grid. Well, maybe to start first, solar is going to be producing energy throughout the day. You're going to have the opportunity to consume it first and foremost. It's really only the excess energy that you're producing that gets pushed back to the grid where you can create those credits. And under the current structure, if you're on legacy or net metering bridge, you're going to receive a one-to-one credit for all energy your solar panels produce, getting the full retail value when drawing power at night or on a cloudy day. It's not too dissimilar in terms of storing that energy, as sort of thinking of the grid as a virtual battery. The excess solar is going to flow to the grid, earning credits at the dollar for dollar to draw back later. So battery backup is still going to be required to be able to have that actual backup power. Installing a battery, whether it's a Tesla Powerwall, a Franklin A-Power 2, or one of the others that we certainly offer. So that's a high level of what net metering is. And so now what is changing about net metering? And so to understand that, we do have to go back a little bit to NC House Bill 589, which was the driving force behind these changes, something that was enacted really over 3 years ago now. And that enabled utilities like Duke to restructure solar billing. And it was framed by the utilities and Duke Energy to the commission as a path to net zero emissions by 2050. But Duke used it as a push to new interconnection models. And a lot of that stemmed from this idea that Duke suggested, which was that solar customers bore, the cost of Duke's grid changes less than, what a standard homeowner might pay. And so you see that here in the bullet one, Duke's cost sharing argument was that Duke Energy argued that non-solar customers were subsidizing grid infrastructure costs for solar customers. The argument or the narrative that they used was that homeowners with solar who might, offset all of their energy bill in a given month could get down to just that basic facility charge, right? If you're on legacy net metering, you might have months where your minimum charge is really just $16. And Duke Energy argued that for them pushing and pulling energy from the grid that $16 was insufficient in terms of a base charge, in terms of the infrastructure required to maintain that meter and everything else that comes with it. And so they filed changes, and they proposed those changes way back actually in 2021. And then it wasn't until some back and forth, obviously, over a period of time that in 2023, these changes were approved. And so now we're starting to see some of those changes take effect. The first changes were that on October 1st, 2023, that was when homeowners had to get in on legacy net metering, where now anyone after that period had the option, in theory, between net metering bridge, NMB, and residential solar choice being RSC. Really things have continued to trend forward since then. And so we've mentioned the names, right? So jumping into those three interconnection models, there is, of course, legacy net metering. Those are folks who went solar prior to that 2023 deadline. And they're going to get that one-to-one credit at the full retail rate. There's no additional fees. There was no time of use rates in effect. They were just, standard residential customers in terms of how Duke billed them. They just had credits for the excess energy they produce, and were able, of course, to use energy directly otherwise. Now, there was one wrinkle in terms of how that worked for legacy customers that was something to be aware of, is if you were producing excess energy in a given month, that energy would roll over until the month of May, which at that point every year, those credits would be completely zeroed out. That could be a point of frustration for some folks. May is a mild billing period. Spring, you're oftentimes producing really well, but maybe not consuming as much. And so that was something that, was weighed as well. And so anyone who's on that legacy net metering structure, they're grandfathered on it until the end of this year, at which point they're going to have to transition over to likely net metering bridge. So that brings along net metering bridge, which opened up after that October 1st deadline in 2023. It was designed to be this sort of transitionary option, and it's still one-to-one credit at the full retail rate. The big difference is that, the argument from the Utilities Commission was that if we're going to make a change here, solar customers need to get value for all of the energy that they produce. And so it was not satisfactory anymore to them that credits would zero out at the end of that month of May. And so the agreement came down to, okay, well, we're going to look at the net excess credit at the end of a given month. So now everything that's produced and goes directly against the energy that you use, that's going to be completely at a one-to-one rate. It's only on the net metering bridge model that if you overproduce in a given billing period, in other words, you produce more than what you need during that billing period, that excess is credited at the wholesale rate. So that's, just about 4 cents per kilowatt hour. And what that means is that actually can go against your minimum bill, the flat charge that you would otherwise have to pay at the end of the billing period. And so we've seen cases where it reduces it down below, to the previous monthly minimum bill, that's $16, because now on this net metering bridge, you are otherwise looking at a minimum bill charge of about $28 a month. And so those credits can actually go against that $28 and decrease you down below, $16, in some cases even zero, or a negative balance that would in theory roll over to a future billing period and be applied there as well. So you're always getting value for the energy that you produce on this new structure. There were annual capacity limits that were put in place on the net metering bridge rider. And so now we're in the last year of this rider option. And so that will close at the beginning of next year, January 1st. In the meantime, anybody who is on net metering bridge has up to 15 years of eligibility. And that's going to be 15 years less the number of years spent on legacy. So, in theory, if you're a customer who you've had solar for 10 years at this point, then in theory, you only have 5 years of eligibility on net metering bridge before ultimately, just like those who would be on for 15 years on net metering bridge would ultimately get transitioned over to residential solar choice. And so that brings along solar choice. It's a time of use billing structure. There's still that net excess credit rate for wholesale. and that's going to be the same thing, that 4 cents per kilowatt hour. The minimum bill charge is going to be the same, and there are the potential of some grid access fees depending on the size of the system. That's just going to be determined in the sizing of that system as well. So people can enroll in that structure now. We have customers who are on Solar Choice, and they're seeing savings, they're realizing those savings, they're taking advantage of being on time of use. But critical peak pricing does apply. And then, so here in a moment, we'll get a little bit into some of the specifics of how specifically Solar Choice works, how you can realize savings on Solar Choice. But the big deal here, of course, is that Net Metering Bridge is open for the remainder of this year unless spots run out earlier, and then Solar Choice will be the option for homeowners going solar after that. So diving a little bit deeper on the time of use side of things. So under RSC, your energy rate's going to vary by the time of day and the season. So here's how that breaks down. In the summer, we're in June here, so between May and September, you're going to see that your peak rate is between 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. So that's where you're going to be paying a higher cost of electricity, whereas the off-peak rate in this scenario would be 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. And that standard pricing rate is actually less than the current retail rate. So you are going to realize savings, even if you just eliminated your on-peak consumption, that 6 to 9 window. And then discounted rates are going to be from 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. So that's a much cheaper cost of electricity when you're consuming any energy that's within that overnight rate. In the winter, things flip a little bit. Instead of looking at the evening hours, they're looking at the morning rush. So when the heat's kicking on at the start of the day, 6 a.m. to 9 a.m., your off-peak that's still 9 to 11 a.m., 4 p.m. to 1 a.m., and 3 to 6 a.m. Where's your discounts from 1 to 3 and then 11 a.m. to 4 p.m.? That's when the sun's coming out. And of course, your home's getting a little bit more natural of a boost, and your heat's probably not running as much. Now, what's important to understand about this is that these buckets, these peak windows, off-peak windows, they may not always align with how a solar system is going to perform. And so part of understanding what your savings are going to look like and what you can benefit from with the solar system is on us, and from a design perspective, collaborating with you to design a system that best suits those time windows, but also being aware that having a battery is really going to maximize your ability to shed load to a time of day that's most affordable for you. In theory, to be able to charge that battery so that during the peak time, you can pull from your battery as opposed from the grid, and instead just pull energy from the grid when it's absolutely cheapest to you. And so that's something that is certainly going to continue to become more popular for those folks exploring RSC and getting transitioned to RSC as that time comes. So just to review some of those critical dates and timelines. So obviously there was March 23rd, 2023. We talked about when those new rules were approved, when legacy net metering closed to new customers, which was October 2023. Where we are today, which is Net Metering Bridge capacity is filling quickly. We're running out of time to take advantage of that rate structure. And then we can look ahead here to the end of this year, where Net Metering Bridge will not be an option anymore to new solar customers. And anyone who is on legacy or Net Metering Bridge will have to start anticipating when that date comes for RSC in the future, but more so just knowing that legacy customers would go ahead and transition to NMB, and we'll learn more about that process as well. But yeah, the big deal is there, of course, Net Metering Bridge closes to new applicants at the end of this year. So what does this mean for existing solar customers? So we've talked about it a little bit. If you went solar before October 2023, you're currently grandfathered into legacy net metering. You're receiving that one-to-one credit with just the true up at the end of the month of May. But that's only going to be the case until the end of this year, at which point you are going to find yourself moving over to NMB. There may be cases where RSC might make more sense for you. If you have a battery system and your system's designed to produce more east-west, or if you're someone who's pretty aware of the time of day that you're using energy and you're going to be able to mitigate your peak really well. And so, the steps that we have here in terms of action steps for existing customers one is to just stay informed and know the transition deadline. So that's what this webinar is about. Number two is to evaluate whether just transitioning to net metering bridge and continuing it forward in that way makes the most sense, or if it could possibly make sense for you to think about time of use and what adding a battery could mean to your system. Or if you already have a battery, what would it look like for you to take advantage and leverage that to try to maximize savings? And so that's something we'd want to explore. Of course, step three there, consider that battery storage. So talk about that. And of course, that's what we're here for, is help model options and just plan your transition, see what could be a good fit for you. Also understanding that, if you're on Duke Energy and you have a battery or you're interested in a battery, something I don't have a lot of information in this presentation for today is that Duke does have their Energy Wise home program. You can get, anywhere from $20 to $50 to $92 a month, depending on the size of your battery system, by participating in their virtual power plant program. So if you have any questions about that and you're thinking, this could make a lot of sense to transition, because not only could I get those credits, but those could go against my minimum bill and give me a $0 bill potentially. That's something that our team would be more than happy to talk about. And so just to review these two options, so if you go solar now, then obviously you have net metering bridge, 101 credit for retail rate. It's going to true up monthly with that net excess at the wholesale rate of just about 4 cents per kilowatt hour. There's going to be a $28 a month minimum bill, but that credit, that 4 cents for excess, is going to be able to go against that. And if you have a battery credit, it can go against that. That $28 is there for Duke Energy Progress customers, whereas it's $22 for Duke Energy Carolinas customers. Duke Energy Progress is most of the eastern half of the state. So obviously we're here in Wilmington. Many of you probably are here on this side of the state as well. But if you're in, Cary, Durham, Apex, west side of the triangle, then you very well could be on DEC. And so that minimum bill will be $22. There are no time of use rates on the net metering bridge schedule, and annual capacity limits to apply, and they're filling up. So if you're not yet on with solar system, now's the time to take advantage of securing your spot. Then longer term, you're transitioning to solar choice, or if you were to evaluate a project for next year, that's going to be time of use billing, as we just discussed, same net excess credit for a wholesale rate. And that's going to be about that 4 cents. We talked about the monthly minimum bill. That's all the same. There are potentially grid access fees, so that's something that could apply. And there are also critical peak pricing events that could apply as well. That's going to be, a few times a year where Duke Energy is going to say, hey, this is a critical peak pricing event. And so that peak window that you normally have is actually going to be at a higher rate. And so even more reason to just continue considering what having battery storage looks like, because while they're bringing those into effect for some of these solar customers, we really do anticipate that that's going to become a bigger issue for, all homeowners at some point or another. And so you have the opportunity for potentially greater savings, with battery storage. And so that's just something to be aware of as well. And so just to review, these are some of the advantages of being on net metering bridge, certainly in favor of residential solar choice. It's just more straightforward savings. You can produce, what you produce offsets what you consume directly. You don't have to worry about when it's produced, how it's being consumed. It's much easier to model, easier to understand. You can avoid that time of use structure where that just adds a layer of complexity. If you're someone where maybe, a battery isn't right for you, then you don't have to worry about whether or not that's a good fit. And your bill can be pretty predictable. You don't have to worry about, when you're using things or having that battery. The other thing is just knowing that you lock in that rate structure for 15 years. If you were to go solar this year, that gives you 15 years of this is what my rate structure looks like. This is what how I'm credited, that's in place for that timeline. You can't really say much is all that clear in terms of the rate environment with utilities. So 15 years to be on a rate plan like that, know how you're going to be compensated for what you produce, I think is really attractive. We've got project developers on here, Dar and Caleb. Caleb's seen 2 co-ops that he works with where all of their customers, 2 electric co-ops, where all of their electric customers were changed to time of use demand within a couple months of each other. No choice. They're just all in time of use. And so while this is something that only maybe now has the potential to impact solar customers, I think that we're very much going to find more people moving towards time of use as time goes on. And it's first come, first serve. So while that deadline is there, it's possible spots could run out sooner. So if you're interested in getting yours, then we encourage you to explore that and see if it's a good fit. So talking about things beyond just that deadline, we have a lot of reasons that we think solar is going to continue to be a good fit. Certainly for anyone who takes advantage of the timeline that's in place with that deadline coming up at the end of this year. But we believe it's going to be a good fit for homeowners beyond that. I think it's important to touch on that. And some of those reasons are that these systems are increasingly able to be optimized for time of use. We can size them, design them for your energy needs more specifically. Battery storage, of course, serves multiple purposes, being able to have backup power, but also be able to shift your load to cover your on-peak usage. And that's something that's also more capable from a load analysis and shifting side. Whether you have an electric vehicle, it can be programmed to charge during time of use hours. If you have an HVAC system with a smart thermostat, you can manage when it's cooling or heating your home as well to reduce those charges. And so just to hit the three notes here on the right, solar's still worth it. For anyone who hasn't seen, Duke Energy just proposed an 18% rate increase. And going solar, producing solar, if you are already or considering doing so, just locks in your cost of energy for that portion that you're producing yourself now at the current rate. One of the questions we've been asking ourselves lately is if you could go back 5-10 years ago and pay what it cost for energy then today, would you do it? I think we'd all say yes. And the reality is that when you decide to move forward with a solar project today, that's what you're doing for your future self 5-10 years from now, is locking in that cost of energy for what you're producing. Now, we also know that grid reliability is an increasing concern. Our own generation just reduces the dependence on an aging system. That's why I think you see so much popularity and encouragement from Duke for programs like their battery control program, because it supports their grid. The infrastructure is oftentimes 40, if not more, years old. We also continue to see, conversations around data centers. We all understand the population growth our state is seeing, our states are seeing. And so those factors are just going to continue to put pressure on Duke Energy, and they're going to continue to try to raise those rates. And so producing solar is going to continue to be an attractive value proposition for those of us who want to take advantage of paying for electricity at yesterday's cost. So some key takeaways here. Of course, we talked about the deadline from the previous legacy net metering structure. We talked about how legacy customers are going to need to transition at the end of this year. New solar customers, of course, can still choose from net metering bridge today, which we encourage, or looking at RSC if it could be a good fit for them beyond that deadline. Existing solar homeowners, are going to just have to prepare for that transition, see if NMB makes the most sense, or if RSC could be a good fit with a battery, and start evaluating those options now, especially if it's battery storage. Could be a great fit, not to mention getting yourself some backup power. Anyone considering solar really should act before that January 1st, 2027 deadline to just lock in their spot for net metering bridge while capacity still exists. And then, of course, our last takeaway is really just that solar remains a strong investment even after that deadline, as we just understand that the right system design, battery pairing, load optimization is going to outpace, from a savings perspective, any other investment, given that we've got rate environment where electricity rates are only going to continue to go up. Now, I wanted to take a quick moment just to call to action, all of you in different ways, right? And so if you already have solar, maybe you don't have a battery and you're curious about what that could look like for you. One, to have backup power, but two, to set yourself up to maybe realize more savings as you potentially transition to time of use. And so if you're interested in exploring that, we encourage you to talk to a member of our team. You can email getstarted@capefairenergy.com, or if you've worked with, Dar, Caleb, John, Pat, and I encourage you to reach out to them directly if you worked on a project with them. We also love to ask, and we are, of course, we grow through referrals. So if you know someone, friends or family, who could be interested in even just exploring a project, there's never been a better time to take a look to see if it could be a good fit for them. And if you've done this and you enjoy the system that you have on your home and you're realizing the savings, then why not share that with someone else? Give them the chance to take advantage of the savings that they can realize before things shift a little bit. So you can do that at capefreeenergy.com/referrals. And then lastly, if you are one of those folks who has not taken the leap yet to install a system on your home, it's not too late. Now's a great time to start looking, see if it's a good fit for you. Go through the process of having a custom design for your home. And if it's a good fit, great. You maybe just in time to take advantage of getting on the net metering bridge structure before that deadline. If it's not, that's okay too, but it does not hurt to have information. And so you can get started with the get started at capefreeenergy.com email as well. All right. So a lot of stuff there. Really thank everyone for hopping on. I know I did a bit of a marathon there in a quick 26 minutes. And so it looks like we've got some questions coming in. Great question here from John. And I've got Dar Hupch and Caleb Timothy, two of our project developers, on with me today as well. So I'll probably send a couple of these questions their way. I think the first one here, and if you guys can answer it, great. If not, I'll do my best as well. If we don't have an answer to one of these questions, then we'll go follow up and we'll let you all know also. So John, this says, I've been on legacy since 2016. If I sell my house, can the plan transfer to a new owner? My understanding is that they're not going to transition your rider to a new homeowner, that they're going to be able to jump in on the same structure. Now, if you've had a system since 2016, you're 10 years in, right? And so that new homeowner, if they were to buy your home today, they'd anticipate, another 5 years before they would have to transition over to RSC. So hope that answers your question. Jumping through a couple here. Question from Amy. Yes, Amy, that's a great question. If we're legacy customers who have until January 1st, 2027 to transition, will we still have an NMB1 option then? Or are you saying we need to switch now and lose June through December on the legacy plan? Amy, that's a great question. My understanding is that you have the ability to transition at that time. And so that's something we're going to have clarity on from Duke on exactly what you need to do to make sure you end up on the right rider there. But I would not at this point suggest that you need to go ahead and transition over. That's going to be something that we look at here towards the end of the year. But yes, you should be able to transition over to NMB towards that time. Good question here from Sandy. Dar, maybe I can toss this your way. What if you have a generator? How does that work if we go solar?
Yeah, Gabe, that's a great question. So we install solar for a home that already has a standby generator in place. We just need to make sure that our installation is done so that the generator can't interfere or cause any damage to the solar system. Many of the people that we're working with now are also interested in extending their gas supply or reducing their reliance on a generator, and that's where sometimes integrating a battery makes sense as well.
Thanks, Dar. I just want to take a moment. I see probably 3, 4, 5 questions here from all sorts of folks. You have existing systems. You're wondering if you need to do anything with Duke to make sure you end up on net metering bridge, or if you can just wait till the end of the year and automatically get transitioned. I would say let's get a clear answer from Duke on that. The understanding we've had is that you were going to be automatically transitioned, but we'll get some clarity on that and reach out, probably via the same method that we sent this campaign out for the webinar, and would encourage you to speak to a project developer in the meantime if you have any questions about that. So yeah, just certainly don't want anyone to feel like we're missing that question. I see that from several folks, so we'll follow up on that end. And then I see a question here from Peter. Yeah, absolutely. We'll have a recording of this available as well. We'll send that out via email. If you have any other questions or for some reason you don't get that recording, feel free to reach out. We'll send it your way as well. And let me see here. Great question from David. David, yeah, you are one of the folks who are on time of use already. And it's been neat to see your bills benefiting from you covering the peak when your batteries automatically take over during that time. You don't need to do anything. You're on residential solar choice already. You're maximizing your savings with how the batteries are programmed. That's a great case study of how that can work. And yeah, you don't have to anticipate anything changing. Your system's rocking and rolling. So thanks for joining. Peter, great question. Yes, I think Duke is probably making a ton of money and enjoying the benefits of having some of the energy that solar customers put back on the grid. But the reality is that they were able to make their case to the commission that paying just a $16 minimum bill is not covering enough of the infrastructure costs that solar customers use. I don't, have to agree with it, but that's unfortunately what they ruled on it. I do think that for folks who switched from legacy or are switching from legacy to net metering bridge, I know a lot of you have been frustrated with, hey, at the end of May every year, all my credits that I produce in the early part of the spring, they go away and I got nothing for it. I think we've been generally pretty surprised, and I think our customers have been really happy on net metering bridge when they found that they have, that net excess credit going against their minimum bill charge on a month in, month out basis at times, and they get some $0 bills, especially with the battery once you apply the battery credits that are available. So if you're someone who does not like losing those credits and likes the idea of potentially having some $0 or less than $0 bills, then the switch and then adding a battery is not necessarily a bad thing. We're running through some other things here. Let's see. John, with the F-150 Lightning and the large battery, of course, that comes in it, I don't believe that that's currently going to be approved for their virtual power plant program. It's an interesting question, as more homeowners like yourself have those EVs and have the ability to potentially bi-directionally charge. But I don't believe that there's any program currently for those batteries to be used for that program.
I think it's likely that for Duke to approve participation in virtual power plant program, they would have batteries permanently installed and can be
That's a
accessed.
good point. That's a good point, Dar. Yeah, they need the ability to tap into it during their specific events. And so if it's in the form of a vehicle that can be driven away, then they might take issue with that.
Gabe, I just feel like adding, I see some comments and questions here. There's certainly maybe some anxiety about the switch from legacy to net metering. I just want to add my perspective, having generated many proposals on legacy and having had to navigate that switch to NMB. I think we were all surprised to find that the payback period was not really as negatively affected as we might have thought due to some of the things that you mentioned. And, in fact, for anyone who's had solar is thinking about these rates impacting them, I hope that they're also thinking about how rates have went up so much faster than we might have predicted a few years ago for generating just like this. So it seems at this point that anyone who's made a decision to go solar in the last 5 years is going to get a payback at or potentially far greater than what they might have anticipated just due to some of these other changes that we're seeing.
Sure. Yeah, I think 100%. I would agree. I see some pretty specific questions here for some of our folks, our legacy customers who've had systems for longer periods of time. Maybe you had a time of use structure you were on in the past, they had some of those years ago, or maybe you were transition. If you had any questions about what that could look like, I'd say feel free to reach out to our team. You're welcome to email me directly, which is just gabe.amey, A-M-E-Y, at capefoorenergy.com. Be happy to connect you with a member of our team that would be best suited to navigate that. There are some very specific cases to see what might make the most sense for you.
There's a good one here, Gabe, from Mark and Michelle Hickman asking if they need to change anything on their Franklin app, switching from legacy to net metering. So in that case, the answer is no, whether you're running in self-consumption or emergency backup, nothing would change going from legacy to net metering bridge. However, if you did decide to transition to time of use, that is when you want to put your battery into time of use operating mode, make sure that the tariff is set.
Yes, good question here, Amy, as well. It says, is it fair to assume that kilowatt hour rate of, that 3.9 cents at almost 4 cents will increase as Duke increases their energy rates to customers? Yes. Yes, it is, Amy. It's actually already gone up since they first rolled out that rate structure. It started about 3.4 cents, so now we're up there almost about 4 cents. So that will continue to trend up that wholesale net excess energy rate. Chris, great question there about how long you'll be on net metering bridge if your system was installed in 15, 16. That would, put you right about 4 or 5 years, depending. And so, definitely good to be aware of that, know how much time before you're going on RSC. Um, here's a good question from Roger. Caleb, maybe you want to jump in on this one. Does adding a battery require different inverters?
No, it does not, Roger. So sounds like you have Chilicon inverters there. You'll have a wide range of batteries that we could help you look at and see if one of them may be a good fit for you.
Hey,
Yep.
Roger, I'll just add, it doesn't necessitate you to use a different inverter, but if you want to, we could help you do that.
So yes, there are a lot of options from the battery side. Chris, if you're interested in exploring battery storage, just give us a quick email. You can email getstarted@capefearenergy.com. Our team will connect with you, set you up with one of our project developers, see what options could make sense, explore those options, and make sure we're designing a system that really best meets your goals. So be happy to do that. See a question here from Linda. I think we addressed the wholesale rate a little bit just in terms of it's the rate, the wholesale rate is essentially the rate that Duke's telling us that they would have to buy energy for if they went to the market to purchase it. And so they're saying anything over and above covering what you use, that's what we're willing to pay you. It's just what we would go and pay for it elsewhere for. Now, I also see though that you mentioned it's about 11 cents per kilowatt hour. I think this might come as a bit of a shock for anyone who's had a system for, say 5 years or even less. Our cost per kilowatt hour after tax right now is between 15 and 16 cents. And so when, I started here in 2018, and I remember at that time looking at bills and the effective rate being at about 11 cents. So it's already quite a big difference. We've seen, 6% annual increases for quite some time. So that I think that's just helpful to understand is, we're paying a lot more for the energy we consume than we think. And that's why I think, if you do have a month where you don't cover all of your usage, it probably looks like a lot more than what it used to. And you probably talked to a lot of folks who don't have solar, whose bills just continue to go up and up and up. Another good question about the grid access fee. I think that would be, it's based on the system size. And so it's going to depend from system to system. We'd have to understand a little bit more about yours in order to tell you what that could look like. But yeah, great thing to have a conversation with the project developer about to see what, your bill could look like when that time comes.
Just to bracket it for you, Chris, and it's usually less than $10.
Cool. That's helpful. Thank you, Dar. All right, we've covered a lot of ground here. I just want to make sure there are no other questions that we haven't really hit. John, I think our team would like to connect with you. If you've got a question about part of your system from 10 years ago, be happy to talk about that. Tom, I would love to help model switching to time of use with you. I would love to do that. Send me a quick email. Just gabe.amy@capefearenergy. We have the tools where we can, if we have the very specific interval data from your Duke portal, which we'd be happy to walk through with you and how to get that, where we could plug that in and look at what it would mean for you to switch from, say, a traditional net metering to a time of use structure. And so, that's something where we want to learn more about the best ways to model that and, be more than happy to walk through that with you and see if it makes sense for you to switch. So send me a quick email. Appreciate it. John, I'll have someone follow up with you. So I appreciate that. All right. We've covered a ton of ground, guys. I want to turn it over to each of you real briefly just to see if you feel like there's anything else that's worth sharing. I know you all are meeting with homeowners every day who are, you're working on these systems. You've seen every scenario. What are some of those conversations like? I mean, what are you hearing from folks who are thinking about this deadline?
Yeah, Gabe, I appreciate that. I think the narrative is pretty clear. It's that the utility is going to continue to make it more difficult for people to benefit from these installations. So I just want to echo what you said for the folks that are on here that have already enjoyed the benefits of solar. Keep it to yourself. Let's try to get as many people in our community to take action now while they still have this range of options. And then looking forward, we're obviously excited about how we can leverage batteries to continue to work in conjunction with systems. But the clear and present opportunity today is right there. And hey, I also want to give a shout out to Ron Hess, I see on here. Mr. Hess, I have been looking at your systems monitoring for many years now. I often use it as an example when I meet a homeowner who wants to see how a system performs over many years. I've always enjoyed pulling yours up as an example. So good to see your name on here. Thank you for your support.
Very cool. Very cool. Caleb, anything else to add?
Yeah, thanks, Gabe, and appreciate your perspective there, Dar. I'd really echo a bit of what you said, but I'd truly say there's never a better time to see if solar is a good fit, not only for you, but friends and family, for those of you that already have a system. When you look at where rates are going in the future and the current programs that we have for solar, there is no better way to purchase your energy than through solar, assuming your home's a good fit. So worthwhile to let your friends know about this change and possibly share the recording with them as well.
Perfect. All right. No better note to end it on. So yes, please reach out to our team if you have a system, you have questions about what makes the most sense for you, or if you don't have a system and you just want to see, could it be a good fit for you? Otherwise, thank you again so much for joining today's webinar. I think this was our biggest group we've ever had. So it really means a lot that when we put these together, y'all show out. And we hope it's been helpful. It's been informative. And we really appreciate everyone being a part of this community. So have a great night. And if you have anything that you need, just reach out. Thanks.